a scientist. I guess he was sort of of a rogue thinker. In any case, he had this whole idea. I can't remember what his name was. He had this whole theory about something. And he wrote a whole treatise, and he handed it in to his professor. And the professor said, come back, I'll read it, and I'll come back. And so he came back to the professor like a day later, and the professor said, I read this paper, and it's just garbage. It's just terrible. It's just ridiculous. And he threw it into the garbage. He had a garbage bin next to him. And this poor fellow, he had worked on it for like a year or whatever. And this was his whole way of thinking, his whole way, he didn't really agree with anybody else. He had a whole way of thinking, and it just sort of was not conventional at all. And he really wasn't good at much of anything else. I guess socially he wasn't, very special. I guess he didn't have any friends particularly. And he was a loner. He was a loner, and he never really had any success in anything in his life. And he figured now he would go into university, he would succeed in something, maybe somebody. And the professor said that he was just nothing, so he threw it away. He threw away the paper away. So he's walking around all depressed, and he's got no one to talk to, and there's no future for him, and no past. And everything he did that amounts to absolutely zero. And he's just suffering, terrible. It's hard for him to work at any normal job. He always has these ideas coming up. And so he decides God forbid, he's going to commit suicide. He writes this book, so he decides he's going to commit suicide. So he goes to this bridge, I guess in the middle of the night, and he climbs up on this thing to jump in. And suddenly he thinks to himself, listen, instead of committing suicide, maybe I'll commit egocide. I'll change my way of looking at the world. I'll change my way. I'll change my expectations. I'll change everything, So maybe I won't get a job. Maybe I'll die of hunger. Maybe who knows what. Maybe everybody will laugh at me. What do I care? If I'm going to die right now, and so what difference if I die now? I die in another month. And so what if nobody accepts me? So I'll commit egocide. I'm going to throw my ego into the river, and I have no more expectations about anything. And so he wanders around. Somehow or other, amazingly, he gets food, maybe gets little odd jobs or something. And he goes to concerts, and he goes to, free concerts and free lectures. Just wanders around, decides he's nothing in the world is going to disappoint him. He has no expectations. He goes into one of these lectures, and he still he goes into a lecture, and he hears a professor lecturing, and the professor is saying his ideas. Exactly his ideas. And the professor is saying that he knows these ideas are very, very revolutionary, but he's just thinking, and maybe it could be. So afterwards, he goes up to the professor and he says to him, excuse me, can you tell me, where did you get these ideas from? And the professor says, oh, the ideas are not mine. He said, but I don't know where I got them from. So what does that mean? He said, well, I saw there was in the garbage, there was this big garbage man, and I saw that there was a treatise there, and I thought maybe it got thrown away by mistake, so I lifted it up, and there's no name on it. There's no name on it anywhere. So I thought it was pretty interesting, So I took it and I started reading it. It was pretty interesting. It was crazy, but it was interesting. I read it more, and I thought, these are some nice ideas, This is really interesting. I don't know if it's practical. So he says, listen, those ideas are mine. The professor so-and-so, he threw it away in the garbage. He said they weren't worth anything. He said, what? Not worth it? I think these are, they have to be worked on, but they're really, and the person from that he became famous, and I looked in the book and I'll find out who his name is. So from this we know the story that it's possible to commit egocide, just to stop expecting so much from the world and stop being so disappointed if things don't go the way we want, and to remember that we can always change our attitude and way of looking at the world. And that the world can't get us down. At worst, the world can make us neutral. Things aren't going the way we expect. So we have to know, we have to reset, reboot. So that can be a good lesson. And that's essentially what we just learned in the Sikha right now. That Bereshit is telling us that God is creating everything brand new every second. And that gives us the power also of renewal. We can always say, you know, up to now, maybe things have been like this, but I can change it from now on. Have a good day. Okay, so I would like to learn at 3 o'clock. Those of you that would like to learn